The recreational pot business is booming in Oregon, and marijuana retail stores are now open in California. Despite the growth, there is uncertainty in the industry about how the Trump administration may crack down on pot companies. Attorney General Jeff Sessions recently rolled back guidelines that instructed the Justice Department to take a hands-off approach on pot. Despite that, Oregon and other states have vowed to move forward. Tonight, we examine the state of the industry with a panel of marijuana insiders. From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Good evening. Welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. Voters in Oregon approved legal recreational pot in 2014. But marijuana businesses have always operated with the knowledge much of what they do is still illegal under federal law. Earlier this month, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced the Justice Department is rolling back Obama-era guidelines that basically took a hands-off approach to marijuana in states where it's legal. What does this new policy mean for the cannabis industry in Oregon? It's sure to be a hot topic as cannabis professionals and investors meet for their 4th annual Cannabis Collaborative Conference in Portland next week. Welcome to my guest, Samuel Gross, an attorney who advocates for the businesses and people who make up the marijuana community. Christine Smith, the CEO of Gron Chocolates. Christine spent 20 years in Portland as an architect. In 2014, she launched her business of what she calls delicately nuanced chocolate infused with clean, green, certified cannabis. Also joining us, Anthony Johnson. He's a leading cannabis law reform activist. Johnson was the co-chief petitioner of a measure in 2010 that helped pave the way for the eventual legalization of marijuana in Oregon. Welcome, everyone, to Straight Talk. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Recreational marijuana has been legal in Oregon for more than 3 years since retail sales began. Let's go around the table and tell me what you think the state of the industry is right now. And Anthony, you were there from the start.
Yeah, I think if you look at the big picture, the industry is going well. We've created more than 19,000 jobs, brought in more than $100 million of new revenue to the state, and the sky hasn't fallen. The things we can improve, I think we need to do a better job taking care of patients, helping out small businesses and small farmers. But overall, I think we are a model for the rest of the country.
And Christine, from a businesswoman's point of view.
I completely agree. I think there's a lot of emphasis right now on some of the struggles that we've had, but we've had a ton of successes that we've done, and there's a lot to show for it and where this industry is, the jobs it's brought, and actually the measures that we've done to control pesticides that go far and beyond what other states have done. So we're really setting trends that other states are following.
And Samuel, from a legal standpoint.
I think that the laws under state law have started to settle down. I know that at the beginning there was a lot of flux in the legal environment and laws and regulations were changing. However, now we see with Sessions' latest memo coming out that there's now another set of uncertainty in the laws regulating this environment.
And we'll dig into that in just a couple of moments. Anthony, what do you think is going to happen with the legalization just recently in California? Will that have any effect on Oregon?
Well, I think that it's going to further push the federal government to change the law eventually. So eventually, what's going on in California is going to help Oregon. And one thing to keep an eye on is that in California, they have allowed for localities to have consumption lounges, places where adults over 21 can use cannabis in a public, setting.
And we don't have that.
We don't have that here in Oregon. So I think we'll look what California does and maybe move to mimic that if all goes well there.
Let's take a look at some factoids about marijuana. 29 states and several U.S. territories have legalized the medical use of marijuana, and 8 of those states and the District of Columbia also allow recreational use for adults over 21. Oregon was the first state to decriminalize personal possession in 1973. It legalized medical marijuana in 1998 and recreational use in 2014. As Anthony mentioned, the state says the marijuana industry has created 19,000 jobs, bringing in $70.2 million in taxes last year. And sales are estimated this year, in 2018, to be at least $520 million, more than $500 million, so it's growing. And Christine, the edible market came along about a year later after general sales because the OLCC was worried about complex regulations. Have you seen your business grow?
Our business has grown. It's incredible. This industry took off at a sprint, at a run, and we really kind of had to learn to walk after we've started running down the path. And it's been an incredible journey, and every day is just a new learning experience. But we've Our sales this year were 4 times what they were in 2016. We were the first licensed processor to actually get our process validation and to hit the shelves a year ago, just over a year ago, in Oregon. So we've seen a steady growth. We've seen.
What exactly do you make?
We make chocolates. We make really it's chocolate is what we focus on, and specifically we grow. I have a farm as well. That's another business. We grow clean green certified cannabis from our farm. We then process it into a clear distillate, and then we put that into chocolate. So you're getting fair trade, beautiful, high-end chocolate that really doesn't taste like cannabis.
Who's your typical customer?
You know, our typical customer is you.
Well, do you have like first-time users?
We do. We have a lot of first-time users, and one of the beautiful things about the Oregon market, and we're the only state.
Just say that I'm not one of her customers. just get that clear.
Is that we've limited the edible tolerant or the piece here to 50 milligrams in a package, and no other state has done that. And I think it's a very responsible decision that the state of Oregon has done, and it's a very, very easy way for people to start and to try cannabis edibles, because 2 or 3 milligrams, if you've never tried, that of THC is incredibly effective. You know, in relation to alcohol, that might be like drinking 2 strong beers. And that's just a small little piece. And all the other states have twice the legal limit that's allowed of THC in 1 package of edible. So Oregon's really set the trend in that capacity.
We've seen a lot of growth, and one of the reasons we've seen a lot of growth is because of the Obama-era policies. That under the federal Obama-era policy and the Cole Memorandum, it was more of a hands-off approach. But just earlier this year, Attorney General, as you're well aware of, Jeff Sessions, said he was going to roll back those guidelines, more of a letting the federal authorities in each state determine which approach they're going to take. Governor Kate Brown reacted swiftly. Let's look at her statement. I'll read part of that to you. She said, states are the laboratories of democracy where progressive policies are developed and implemented for the benefit of their people. Voters in Oregon were clear when they chose for Oregon to legalize the sale of marijuana, and the federal government should not stand in the way of the will of Oregonians. My staff and state agencies are working to evaluate reports of the Attorney General's decision and will fight to continue Oregon's commitment to a safe and prosperous recreational marijuana market. Anthony, what did you think when you first heard that Jeff Sessions was planning to roll back these guidelines under the Obama era?
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought it was, you know, a momentary setback for the industry mainly. I think it could potentially give people pause to invest in the industry. After a day or so, then I came to realize that Jeff Sessions actually did the legalization movement a favor, because it galvanized support and it's brought more people to the forefront, and really it's put the issue where it needs to be, and that's in Congress. And Congress needs to act. They need to follow the will of the voters. And if you look at poll after poll, strong majority of voters want to legalize cannabis across this country, treat it the same as alcohol, and a supermajority of voters do not want the federal government to trample the will of the voters in states that have legalized cannabis. So I think Jeff Sessions may rue the day he made this memo change, because it's really strengthened the cannabis legalization movement.
Do you agree with that, Samuel? Do you think it might catapult Congress into taking further action?
Definitely. I think just by you having this show here today is getting this issue in the public sphere, and we are talking about this again, and Congress, it's forcing Congress to act and make some hard decisions. Mr. Johnson previously talked about the strong support in the states, and the representatives of those states in Congress will need, should follow the will of the people in those states and enact legislation. Essentially, we have, a 3-branch government system, and the executive branch should be there to carry out the laws and of the people. It is Congress' job to enact those laws and to change those laws. And I think that the time has come for Congress to seriously examine the laws that are on the books. And Jeff Sessions has basically, by revoking the previous memos, has put together the framework to start having that conversation.
In Oregon, a lot of people are waiting to see what U.S. Attorney Billy Williams will say and do. He has said he will not make any kind of blanket proclamations about this because he doesn't have enough information. He said he's been given a wide latitude now by Jeff Sessions on how he will approach federal policy. He said that he has concerns about the state's regulatory framework and how the laws are policed. And he wrote an op-ed piece in the Oregonian on January 12th. And I'll read part of that. One of the things he's really concerned about is overproduction. And he says overproduction creates a powerful profit incentive, driving product from both state licensed and unlicensed marijuana producers into black and gray markets across the country. This lucrative supply attracts cartels and other criminal networks into Oregon, and in turn brings money laundering, violence, and environmental degradation. Anthony, when you and I talked before this became legal, you were on the show in 2014 before the election, one of the things that you said was that the law was supposed to try to shut down the black market. What does it look like in Oregon? Is there a problem? Are people still buying marijuana from unlicensed producers?
I think in Oregon, within our borders, the illegal market's being curtailed because you have legal access to it. But Oregon has long been an exporter of marijuana, long before we legalized cannabis, long before medical marijuana was legalized. And so long as it's illegal in other states and the profit margins there, then there's going to be the incentive for some people to violate the law. I actually welcome Williams looking into this, and I think if he really looks into it, he's going to see that bringing people into a regulated system is much better than pushing people into the illicit market, because until we fix federal law, overproduction and exporting into states where it's still illegal is going to be an issue.
And that's illegal, isn't it, Samuel, to move marijuana across state lines to a state where it's not legal?
Correct. You cannot move marijuana across state lines. Even you cannot move it from Oregon into Washington, where Washington has a legalized framework as well too. So you have to keep it within the state.
Billy Williams also cites a threat to public safety. Williams says since 2013, marijuana-related traffic deaths have doubled in Colorado. Marijuana-related emergency and hospital admissions have increased 35%, and youth marijuana use is up 12%. He says that's 55% higher than the national average, and we don't have, as far as I know, numbers from Oregon right now. We're still waiting for a state report, so he based it on Colorado. Is it that bad here, Anthony?
I don't think it is, and I think those numbers are skewed a bit. I think what's most important is the overall highway fatality numbers. If you look at the overall highway fatalities numbers, there's not carnage on the highways in Colorado or here in Oregon. People have been testing positive more for cannabis, but I think that's law enforcement paying more attention to the issue. And as far as the emergency room visits, the numbers are real low. I believe you're looking at like 27 emergency room calls a year, and while we don't want that to occur, we don't want minors to get their hands on marijuana or have those emergency room calls, at least now with it legal, people feel the safety to go to the doctor. That's what we want. If they feel like they have an issue, to go to the doctor. But it's a much bigger issue having kids pop Tide Pods in their mouths than it is cannabis.
That's unbelievable. People are doing that. There's another thing that he's concerned about involving rural Oregon. He says he's traveled to rural Oregon to talk to landowners in central and southwestern Oregon that marijuana cultivation is having a detrimental effect on water rights, public lands, and livability. And he says rural communities just don't have the resources to address those issues. Samuel, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, rural Oregon since the early 80s a lot of places have been economically depressed with the leaving of the forestry industry, and now these communities are having economic influx and activity coming in. Yes, there's going to be demands on their infrastructure and things of that nature. Is it detrimental? I think that's a matter of opinion. These marijuana companies that are cultivating down there, they're bringing jobs to the area, they're creating revenue, and so I think it's depending on which side of the coin you look at.
Christine, can you speak to that? Because you said you have a farm. How is that working out with your neighbors?
You know, our neighbors are, we're kind neighbors. So we're good growers. We are very cognizant of having neighbors that are around us, and we've made a point of being friends with them and making sure that we don't do something that might be offensive. We don't leave greenhouse lights on at night. We don't, try to do anything that is leading to some of the issues that you see, and some of them that I hear that are happening down in Southern Oregon. But I agree completely with what you're saying. I think there's a lot of influx, and there's a lot of good things that are happening in these two communities, and it's not all the bad news. I have to say, I think agreeing with what Jeff Sessions has done is really helping the industry in a lot of ways. And while it leaves the waters a little grayer for a little bit longer, coming from a business perspective, it's actually pretty good for me. And I look at it as Oregon's infrastructure with the cannabis really was set up for these small businesses. And that's part of the reason why we have this oversupply is because we had a low barrier to entry. So there are a lot of people that came and joined it. And we got to work those details out and regulate it. But it's allowed for small businesses like mine to come in and to thrive. And so I think overall, you know, this is a really good thing. Keeping the big industry out with the waters being a little grayer lets us get our sea legs a little bit longer here in this small industry, and so that really we get to be leaders outside of the Oregon boundaries when the walls come down.
The U.S. Attorney Williams has said he's going to convene a summit soon so that he can get all this information. And he said based on how that summit goes, he's going to bring stakeholders to the table, and how the state reacts, their response, that will inform his strategy. Do you think that you'll be at the summit, Anthony?
I hope so. I hope he brings in all sides of the issue, brings in community leaders, neighborhood leaders, and I think if he gets a broad spectrum of the Oregon population, he's going to see that a majority of Oregonians favor legalization and approve of the industry.
One of the other things when we talked about legalizing marijuana is you said that there would be strict regulations about selling to minors. And the Cole memo under President Obama also emphasizes the prevention of the sale to minors. The OLCC conducted a sting of pot shops over the holidays using decoys between the ages of 18 and 20 years old to see if they were selling to minors. And the overall compliance rate was over 80% statewide. Portland didn't do as well, only 43%. 7 of those shops were in Portland, only 3 passed, including Panacea, which is on Northeast Sandy Boulevard. And so we're going to listen to the owner of Panacea about that sting, and also to somebody from the OLCC.
It is a bummer that some shops didn't pass, but the issue has been heightened for the industry, and everyone will just try and do a better job in the future.
Taking a lackadaisical approach jeopardizes their business and puts a harsh light on the industry. So if this is a good wake-up call for them, the more the better.
So why is so lax in Portland, Anthony?
Well, that's a good question, and it's unacceptable, and it's something that the marijuana industry needs to do a better job, particularly in Portland. From my understanding, the people who sold to minors, the workers have been fired, the place will be fined, they'll be suspended, and they need to shape up. If they don't shape up, then they'll have their livelihoods threatened and potentially sanctions increased over time.
Anthony, Christine, Samuel, time for us to take a break. Did you want to say something really quickly?
Yeah, I was going to jump in and I'd say I think the industry is really welcoming this level of enforcement. When the OLCC first rolled out its policies, they said we're going to take some time to learn with the industry on how we're going to enforce these rules. And so therefore, with the enforcement coming in, the people that are playing by the rules are welcoming this, and so that the people that are not playing by the rules are going to be fined or leave the industry or be forced to compel with the rules.
Maybe a good thing that they
Yes,
have that sting.
absolutely.
We'll take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Cannabis Collaborative Conference that's coming up next week. We're back in 2 minutes.